everyone, my name is Heejung and my group members consist of Ribka, Hyunju and Tracy. And today we're gonna talk about the globalization with poverty, sweatshop and environment. And let's start.
Start with the biggest question, perhaps the biggest question among all. How does globalization affect the standard living across the globe? Is the recent period of intensified globalization perhaps have associated with the rising high income and fallen poverty, or the opposite of it? Between 1960 and 2000, the world's rising growth was 3.5% per year, compared to 1% each year during the mid-19th centuries. Of course, this high much income is not evenly distributed across the individuals. Ideally, we should compile and gather on incomes from every individuals from every countries in the world. However, a growing body of research has begun to measure inequality using this approach by collecting surveys from representatives from each countries. In this illustration, it shows the global inequality throughout 1820 to 1998, with 200 years of difference. With Gini coefficient, it ranges from the number 0 to 1. The number 0 implies of the complete equality of income, while 1 implies the reverse of it. We can see global income equality increase steadily. However, something drastically changed during the 1970s. This change caused a long-term trend of growing inequality and it finally begins to reverse itself. China is a fast-growing developed country, and India is enjoying a rapid growth as well over the past 15 years, as incomes in China and India have been catching up, leading to coverage towards incomes in the advanced industrialized world. Global inequality fails. Poverty has fallen furthest in countries that are growing rapidly. Therefore, that quote, growth is good for the poor, unquote. A bit controversially, developing countries that have been participating are far more developed than those countries whom sheltered themselves from the global economy. To conclude that joining the community in global affairs and affiliate with international relations can maximize growth and reduce poverty.
Discussing about sweatshop between globalization. Sweatshop, it included a lot of people that actually call to developing countries such as India, China, Bangladesh. It happens a lot in nowadays because like companies such as Adidas, Nike, Forever 21, Walmart, Old Navy, Tommy Hilfiger, Ralph Lauren, H&M, Converse, and so on, that brands that we actually really like well known, uses child labor, or we call it sweatshop, so they would make a lot of profit. It's a lot to make items in North America or other developed countries because they have higher minimum wages. For example, instead of paying $10 to someone making clothes in the United States per hour, companies can pay workers 10 cents each week in India. It's easy to replace workers if they like. It's also dependable because workers in India are forced to work and they'd be abused if they refuse or disobey their orders. Companies such as American Apparel, New Balance, and Tom's sport sweat-free clothing like Sweatshop Free. They suggest people to reuse and donate old clothing instead of buying new clothes to avoid using sweatshop more. The brand Gap has been found to use sweatshops a few years ago. Observers has found Indian children working up to 16 hours a day. Workers say that they have only been paid half of the minimum wage in India. Gap confirmed that they only pay workers half of what they were supposed to and had violated overtime law. One 10-year-old boy told the newspaper that he was sold by his parents to the Gap company. Also, another 12 years old boy told the newspaper that if he or any other children felt sick during the work, they would get whipped with the rubber pipe with oily clothes in their mouth. a boy from West Bangladesh. His name was Jibal, and 12 years old, told the newspaper that he and a few other boys were badly beaten because like our hours are hard, and they will use violence against us if they don't work hard enough. He says there was a name such as Malik, a boy who claimed to be 13, is also working for free. He wants to work in a sweatshop at first because there's no place to sleep. One day he hopes to make enough money to buy a house for his mother. Children as young as 10 told observers that they worked for 16 hours straight without rest or pay. Since 2016, more than 600 clothing makers working for companies such as Gap, H&M, and Walmart, and so on, have died in a preventable fire. 2 years later, 29 workers from Bangladesh died in a Gap sweatshop from a fire. Gap is still not willing to pay for reforming the sweatshops and joining with other companies to build a safety procedure. While we're talking about the sweatshop, you could find out that actually there developing countries are still looking for the workers that like to work in developed countries to get more money. But actually in developed countries we can see that they're using the people who is from developing countries for their own profit.
We live in a world where globalization is something that exists worldwide. And of course, with every new industry, we always have some pros and cons to it, especially regarding the environment. Now, we need to look at first off the cons of the environment. What are the cons of the environmentists in globalization, right? They say that globalization actually makes the environment worse. How? There are several things that we need to learn in globalization. For it to be a transport of goods and services, we need to use transport. Now, usually we use either waterways, like oceans, like ships, and also airways, like planes, to carry our shipments. Now, when we use our ships to carry our cargoes, we usually break the corals, right? Causing more coral bleaching around the world. But if we use planes, then we risk getting more air pollution. Now, this in turn destroys the planet, like oil spill happen, and then other than the transport, it also relates to the historical materialist point of view of globalization, as in the developed countries exploit the developing countries. Now, we can see in Indonesia alone, one of our most famous rivers called Kali Ciliwung is one of the most polluted rivers around the world. Although yes, the government is taking a part in cleaning it, we need to be reminded that it used to be one of the worst river in the world. It's a fact, and it used to be so clean before globalization happened. So what did happen? Around the river stations textile factories. Now, textile factories usually use dyes, and dyes are quite harmful to the environment. In a developed country where the policy and the regulation is actually quite clear, the corporate are actually required to clean their waste before throwing it out into the rivers. In Indonesia, we don't have that much of a strict regulation, and the regulation itself tends to be easy to find a loophole in. Now, of course, other than the environment, the people living there actually get quite impacted, very impacted actually. A lot of kids got sick a lot. They find these new diseases that they don't know how to heal, right? And the people living alone usually don't have enough money to find a doctor in the first place, so they can't afford a doctor, but their children keeps on getting sick. Additionally, they also drink the waters from the rivers, and even though we know it's already has been toxic. And that's why the environmentalists say that globalization can give bad impact to the world. We're going to talk about the pros to globalization. Now, some people say that globalization can actually improve the environment. How does this happen? Some argue that technology is one of the key factors to improving the environment. How? Because as we can see, like China is trying to improve on their green energy. China is, yes, the world's largest contributor to the global pollution, but also China is one of the biggest country to use green energy as its main electricity generator. So yes, it does happen, and because once a country have the ability to make a certain technology, they can actually give it to other countries. That means they can actually give teaching learning activities to countries that needs it. So let's say a lecturer from China can come to Indonesia and then teach the students about more greener electrical engineering. And of course, in turn, in the future, the Indonesian students will become part of the working labor, the working class of the country, and can actually give what they have learned into something that we can feel, something that is material. We can actually improve our green living through globalization in that way. But it's almost to that point that the pros of globalization helping the environment. Liberals say that this happens, yes, which is true, but we also need to understand that not all countries is willing to share their information. Why should they share their information when they can just keep it to themselves and they can just profit from it? Because like solar panels are very effective in a way, though not as effective as nuclear technology, but each panel costs a fortune. It is getting cheaper each day. Now, China is actually benefiting from the sales, so of course they don't want any country to get better at it. So really it goes back to the question, does globalization impacts badly to the environment? It really does depend on the situation. If nobody is as greedy as they were today, maybe it can be better, maybe they can find a better solution. Because why would they send a textile factory into a developing country? It's an easy question actually. It's because we have lax regulation, and because it's easy to bribe, therefore they don't need to clean it. They can cut costs and everything would be cheaper. Their production costs would be cheaper. That's why globalization actually inspired greed, and greed is never good towards the environment, as we can see. Personally, I can say that the cons actually outweigh the pros.